The golden era of the Japanese 4 was built on a single, unwavering philosophy: balance. For 2 decades, M1 was the surgeon's scalpel of the GP grid. It didn't fight the track, it flowed through it. But in the modern era of ride-height devices, radical aerodynamics, and the brutal horsepower of the European V4s, that scalpel has begun to feel like a relic of a forgotten time. The paddock at the secret testing facility was heavy with a different kind of silence, the kind that precedes a storm. For years, engineers had defended their 4 configuration with religious fervor. It was their identity, their soul. But as KTM began to pull away on the straights, leaving riders defenseless, something had to break. Then it happened, a sound that shouldn't exist in a garage, a guttural, predatory growl that vibrated through the concrete floors. It wasn't the high-pitched scream of the engine the world knew. It was deeper, meaner. It was the sound of a V4. Inside the helmet, the most aggressive breaker in the world of motorcycle racing waited for the green light. Didn't come here to play, he came to dismantle the status. The Turkish Lightning was about to take a gamble that would either resurrect a legendary manufacturer or bury their reputation under the weight of a multi-million-dollar failure. No one inside the paddock expected what would unfold next, and it would change everything for him, his team, and the entire trajectory of the season. But behind that calm expression in the pits, pressure was building fast. To understand why a V4 engine is such a seismic shift, you have to understand the physics of the gap. For years, dominated by being the king of corner speed, they carried momentum where others had to brake. But the sport changed. With the introduction of Michelin's latest tire carcasses and advanced aero-wings, the flow style was being hunted down by the point-and-squat style. The V4 engine is a weapon designed for a different kind of war. By narrowing the engine profile, engineers can optimize aerodynamics in ways and 4 simply cannot match. More importantly, the firing order of a V4 provides a mechanical rest for the rear tire, allowing it to hook up and drive out of corners with a violence that makes the 4 look like a toy. Yet for this wasn't just a technical upgrade, it was an admission of defeat. For 20 years they had told the world that the 4 was enough. Adopting a V4 meant admitting that was right all along. Inside the garage, whispers began spreading. Some veteran mechanics, men who had won titles with and looked at the new prototype with skepticism. They feared that in chasing horsepower would lose the sweetness that made the M1 legendary. However, didn't care about sweetness. He cared about the 350 km/h wall. He needed a bike that could match his style, a bike that could handle the extreme front-end loads he creates and then rocket out of the turn before the could blink. The initial data coming off the sensors was staggering. The acceleration gains weren't incremental, they were explosive. But as the sun began to set over the testing track, the lead engineer noticed something in the telemetry that made his blood run cold. Yet the real turning point happened away from the cameras. And from that moment, nothing would ever be the same. Is not a traditional rider, he is a disruptor. While most GP stars were raised in the European Talent Cups, was forged in the chaos of the Turkish streets and the high-pressure world of. He doesn't ride a motorcycle, he bullies it into submission. In the closed-door testing sessions ahead of the Brazilian round, the synergy between and the V4 prototype was described by insiders as terrifying. Traditionally, the M1 required a smooth, elegant touch. You had to be a poet to ride it fast. Is a street fighter. He wants to brake so late that the rear wheel leaves the ground, pivot the bike on a dime, and launch. The V4 engine finally gave him the instantaneous throttle response he had been begging for. Reports from the internal team sources suggested that found significant performance improvements specifically during corner exit acceleration. The bike exhibited a more aggressive throttle response, with power being delivered more efficiently to the rear wheel. It was exactly what he needed to bridge the gap to the front of the grid. But as the lap times dropped, the mechanical strain rose. A V4 runs hotter, it vibrates differently, it demands a completely different chassis flex characteristic. His technical team was now in a race against time to perfect the balance between engine power and bike stability. During the full race simulations, the bike began to show signs of instability at the limit. The data was clear, the bike was fast enough to win, but was it safe enough to finish? The tension in the garage was palpable. Every time entered a high-speed sweep, the mechanics held their breath. Yet this was only the beginning of a far bigger storm. Inside the garage, whispers began spreading about the upcoming Brazilian GP. Brazil has always been a place of high drama in the world of motorsports, a track that demands everything from an engine, long straights followed by heavy technical braking zones. It was the perfect stage for the V4's debut, but it was also the most dangerous place to fail. The technical team faced a nightmare. In the world of GP, you cannot simply swap an engine and expect the electronics to work. The brain of the bike, the ECU, had to be completely remapped for the V4's unique power delivery. According to insiders, the electronic engineers were struggling to find a traction control setting that didn't neuter the engine's newfound power. Meanwhile, in the paddock, the rival teams were starting to smell blood. Management had already begun making inquiries with the technical directors. They wanted to know if its prototype was truly within the spirit of the regulations. The political tension was escalating. Was using a development mule to gain an unfair advantage for the next season, or were they genuinely ready to race? Remain defiant. This bike offers a different sensation, he told a small group of journalists, his eyes hiding the exhaustion of 3 days of testing. There's huge potential if everything can be perfectly put together. But perfectly put together is a tall order in a sport where a millimeter of chassis flex can be the difference between a podium and a high-speed setback. As the team packed the crates for Brazil, a rumor suggested deeper tension behind closed doors. Some claimed the engine had suffered a heavy setback during its final dyno run in Japan. What happened after that left even his closest team members stunned. But behind that calm expression of the team principle, a crisis was unfolding. The V4 was fast, yes. It was explosive, yes. But it was also eating its tires alive. In GP, power is a currency, but tire life is the bank account. If you spend too much too early, you go bankrupt before the final lap. The explosive power distribution that loved was causing the Michelin rear tires to overheat within just 5 laps. In a full race simulation, the tire degradation was so severe that the bike became unrideable by lap 15. This is the hidden curse of the V4. The very punch that makes it fast also makes it a monster to manage. His technical team was working 20-hour shifts. They were trying to use the electronics to soften the engine's character but resisted. He didn't want a soft bike, he wanted the weapon he was promised. This led to a heated confrontation between the riders' camp and the Japanese engineers. It was a clash of cultures, the daring, high-risk nature of a world-class rider versus the cautious, methodical approach of traditional engineering. The media criticism was starting to mount. Online debates were filled with fans questioning why was abandoning its heritage. The 4 is, they argued. Without it, they are just a blue. The psychological pressure on the team was reaching its breaking point. Then came the private test incident. While pushing for a fast lap simulation, experienced a moment that almost ended the project. At 300h, the bike's aero package created a buffeting effect so violent it nearly shook the rider off the machine. It was a clear sign. The engine was now faster than the chassis could handle. However, the twist that followed would change the championship narrative entirely. Yet the real turning point happened away from the cameras, in a small hotel room near the circuit. And his crew chief sat down with a blank sheet of paper. They realized they couldn't wait for Japan to build a new chassis. They had to adapt their riding style to the flaws of the machine. This is where genius shines. He began to experiment with a hybrid line using the corner speed of the old M1 with the late-braking violence of the V4. He was no longer trying to ride the bike as a V4, he was riding it as something entirely new. A V4 that shouldn't work on paper but worked in his hands. The technical team discovered a setup that significantly improved the bike's performance by shifting the weight bias toward the front, allowing the engine's torque to be managed by the rider's right wrist rather than just the electronics. It was a human-centric solution to a mechanical problem. As news of this breakthrough filtered through the paddock, the atmosphere changed. The skepticism turned into a cautious, staggering realization. Wasn't just catching up. They were evolving. The V4 bike now exhibited a more even power distribution and a sharper throttle response than anything they had produced in a decade. The Brazilian GP was no longer just another race. It had become a crucial moment to demonstrate the true potential of this ambitious project. The stakes were no longer just points, they were the future of the sport's most successful manufacturer. But what the paddock discovered next shocked everyone. As the crates arrived at the circuit in Brazil, the tension was at a staggering high. The air was thick with humidity and speculation. Every mechanic in the paddock was watching the garage, trying to catch a glimpse of the exhaust configuration. Its move to develop a V4 engine was no longer a secret, it was a declaration of war. If the development proceeded as planned, could become a force to be reckoned with for the remainder of the season. But the if was doing a lot of heavy lifting. The technical team still faced challenges in perfecting the balance between engine power and bike stability. The rumors of a disputed advantage began to surface again. Some rivals believed was using a non-homologated fuel system to manage the V4's heat. No official confirmation came, but the heated argument in the safety commission meeting suggested that the rivals were truly scared. Walked through the paddock with a look of absolute focus. He knew that the world was watching. He wasn't just fighting his rivals. He was fighting the expectations that had been placed on his shoulders since his very first race. He was fighting for the thousands of fans in Turkey and the millions of loyalists around the world who had waited years for a bike that could finally fight back. The Brazilian GP is predicted to be the beginning of a new era. An era where speed, acceleration, and technological innovation combine to deliver a performance that has been long awaited. If what discovered in these secret tests can truly translate into real-life racing conditions, then the GP world must prepare for a new threat that comes with brutal, unapologetic speed. The era of the surgeon's scalpel is over. The era of the V4 hammer has begun. But as the lights go out on the grid, one question remains. Can the man who tamed the world truly control the most powerful engine has ever built, or will the beast finally bite back? The answer lies in the first corner of the Brazilian GP, and the world is holding its breath.